In this lecture, we are going to start the topic of scintillation counter or the scintillation detector. These type of detectors are completely different from the gas field detectors which we have studied in the previous lectures. So you might know the fact that when an energetic particle, let's say alpha particle, falls on some fluorescent material like zinc sulfide. So when an energetic alpha particle, let's say, falls on zinc sulfide, what does it do? It transfers its energy to the atoms or the molecules of the fluorescent material, and the atoms or the molecules of the fluorescent material, they go to the excited state by absorption of energy from the incoming energetic alpha particle. And when they de-excite, when they return to the ground state, they emit visible photons. So the same thing is utilized in the case of scintillation counter. In some early atomic physics experiments, alpha particles were detected by the light flashes. So when the fluorescent materials, atoms or molecules go to the ground state, they return to the ground state, they emit light flashes which are also called as scintillations. And these scintillations are produced when they struck certain materials like zinc sulfide. So when these energetic particles strike on some fluorescent materials, they transfer their energy, a part of their energy is transferred to the atoms or molecules of the fluorescent material, and flashes of light are seen on the fluorescent material. So in the early atomic physics experiments, this method was used to detect the particles. So each light flash, as you know that fluorescent materials, they emit light flashes when energetic particle strikes the material. So each light flash was counted. So in the early atomic physics experiments, each light flash was counted, and hence this task was laborious. Laborious means it was a very difficult and a hard working task, due to which this technique of detecting the ionizing radiation was impracticable. And why was it impractical? Because this technique could not be used when you have high counting rates. So when alpha particles, they are entering the fluorescent material at a very high rate, means large number of alpha particles are entering, in that case this method of counting each flash would be impractical. And this method of counting the particles, of detecting the ionizing radiations, was abundant with the invention of GM counter. So this method was of no use after the invention of GM counter. But after that, later a new technique was introduced in which these light flashes from a suitable scintillator were detected by a device which is called as PMT. So this method of directly counting the light flashes was very laborious and hence impracticable. But later, after the invention of GM counter, a new technique was introduced in which light flashes, these light flashes were detected with the help of PMT, which is the photomultiplier tube. And what is the principle of this PMT? This PMT converts light signal into electrical signal. So the light signal, these light flashes which are coming from a suitable scintillator were made to enter this PMT, and this PMT converts these light signals into the electrical signals, and these electrical signals could be further recorded with the help of some electronic circuit which is attached with the PMT. Now let's see what is the block diagram of scintillation counter. So there is a scintillator. The ionizing radiation enters the scintillator and this scintillator produces flashes of light. So this ionizing radiation, every particle in this ionizing radiation would transfer its energy to the atoms or the molecules of the scintillator, by which the atoms or molecules go to the excited state, and when they return to the ground state, flashes of light are emitted, and these flashes of light are made to enter PMT, the photomultiplier tube. So this photomultiplier tube, its working we will study further. This photomultiplier tube converts the light signal, these flashes of light, into electrical signal, and these electrical signals are counted. First they are amplified with the help of an amplifier, and then they are counted with the help of a counting device. So this is some electronic circuit. So this is electronic circuit which is attached to the PMT. Now this method of detecting the ionizing radiation. So if you get a pulse, means some ionizing particle has entered the scintillator. So in this way you can detect an ionizing radiation. So this method of detecting the ionizing radiation is very versatile, and it is capable of handling count rates far in excess of those possible in the case of GM counter. So this scintillation counter has an advantage over the GM counter, that it is capable of handling high count rates as compared to the GM counter. What is the principle of a scintillation counter? Now the incoming ionizing radiations when fall on a suitable scintillator. So we will discuss about the types of scintillators which are preferred in the scintillation counter. So the ionizing radiations falling over a suitable scintillator produce light flashes. So light flashes are produced, and these are called as scintillations. Now these light flashes are converted into an electrical signal using photomultiplier tube, using a PMT. Now this PMT converts the light signal into electrical signal, and this electrical signal is further amplified and recorded with the help of a counting device. So some electronic circuit is attached with the PMT. So with the help of that electronic circuit, we can amplify and record these electrical signals, and hence we can detect the ionizing radiation with the help of scintillation counter. Now what is the construction? Now there are three basic parts which are present in the case of scintillation counter. The first one is the scintillator, or you can say the scintillating material. Scintillating material, or just the scintillator. So this material produces light flashes when ionizing radiation enters the material. Now the second part is the PMT, the photomultiplier tube, which converts the light flashes into electrical signal. And last is amplifiers and counting devices. So this we have already discussed, the three main parts of scintillation counter. Now we are going to discuss about the first basic part of scintillation counter, which is the scintillating material or the scintillator. We have already discussed that when an ionizing particle enters the scintillating material, what happens is the atoms or molecules of the scintillating material go to the excited state. So by absorption of energy from the incoming particle, the atoms or molecules of the scintillator go to the excited state. And when they return to the ground state, photons are emitted in that process. So visible photons are emitted in that process, means scintillations are produced. Now The de-excitation process which we are talking about over here, the energy dissipated, the energy released in this de-excitation process could be in the form of thermal energy. And that thermal energy is dissipated in the form of molecular vibrations in the case of liquid or gas. So if you take a liquid or a gaseous medium, in that case, the thermal energy released in the de-excitation process is in the form of molecular vibrations. But if you have a crystal, in the case of crystal, the thermal energy is released in the form of lattice vibrations. So the energy released in the de-excitation process could be in the form of thermal energy. But a small portion of energy in some materials, which are called as scintillators, in these materials, a part of the energy released is in the form of light flashes, and that's why we call them as scintillators. So in these materials, some of the portion of the energy released is in the form of light flashes. Now in the case of scintillators, the amount of light produced is directly proportional to energy deposited. So this is a very important concept, that in the case of scintillators, the amount of light produced, or you can say the number of light flashes which are produced, is directly proportional to the energy deposited by the incoming particle. So more is the energy deposited by this particle in the scintillator, more will be the amount of light produced by the scintillator. So that's obvious that if more is the energy transferred by the incoming particle in the scintillator, more will be the intensity of the light produced by the scintillator. Now let's look at the properties of an ideal scintillation material. So what are the various properties that we must look at when we are choosing the scintillation material? First is that it must have high scintillation efficiency. As in this case, we have discussed that the energy released in the de-excitation process could be in the form of thermal energy, and it also could be in the form of light flashes. But in the case of scintillator, we want more energy should be released in the form of light flashes. So the first property of the ideal scintillation material is that it must have high scintillation efficiency. So more light pulses must be produced in comparison to other form of energy. The second property is that the light yield in the case of scintillation material should be directly proportional to energy deposited. So this is the same as we discussed over here, that more is the energy deposited by the incoming particle in the scintillator, more will be the light yield. So more amount of light will be obtained. So that must be the second property of the ideal scintillation material. The third one is that the scintillation material, the scintillation medium must be transparent to its own wavelength of light emitted. As we have seen that if you take any scintillator, incoming radiation enters the material and this radiation transfers its energy to this scintillation material, and in return this scintillator produces light flashes. Now the other thing that can happen over here is that these light flashes could be absorbed by the other atoms of the same scintillation material. What do we want in the case of scintillation counter? We want more light yield. We want more amount of light must be emitted, and these light flashes, these photons, are then in return made to enter the PMT. But if these photons are absorbed by the other atoms of the scintillator, in that case the efficiency will decrease. So the third property of the scintillation material is that it must be transparent to its own wavelength of light emitted. So it must not absorb its own photons. The fourth property is that the scintillation material must have a short decay time. As we have said that if you have a scintillator, the incoming radiation transfers its energy to the atoms or molecules of the scintillator, and these atoms go to the excited state. And for counting high number of incoming radiations, means for high counting rate, to detect high counting rate, these atoms must go to the ground state immediately. In a very short amount of time, they must go to the ground state and they will emit a photon. And this photon will in return go to the PMT and electric pulse will be generated. So with this incoming particle, light flashes are produced. But what if these atoms, they go to the ground state after some time? So if these atoms, they spend more time in the excited state, in that case these light flashes will be delayed and hence we won't be able to detect high counting rates. So the fourth property is that the scintillation material must have short decay time, means as soon as the atoms go to the excited state, immediately they must go to the ground state and emit light flashes. So in this way we can count the high counting rates. Now the fifth property of the scintillation material is that its refractive index must be near to the glass, that is, must be around 1.5 for efficient coupling with the PMT. So if you have a scintillation material, then you have a glass layer over here and then the PMT starts. So here is a scintillator, here is a PMT, and in between there is a layer of glass. So this scintillator or the scintillating material must be coupled efficiently with this glass, and for efficient coupling its refractive index must be near to that of glass. So refractive index must be near to the glass for efficient coupling with the PMT. So for efficient coupling with this PMT, this scintillator must have refractive index close to that of the glass. And another property of this scintillation material is that it must have high density and high atomic number. So high value of density and high atomic number. So that is the last property of this scintillation material. Scintillators can be categorized into two main types. The first one are the organic scintillators. Now under organic scintillators, there are various types of scintillators that come. The first one are pure organic scintillators. So they are in their pure form, pure organic scintillators. An example is anthracene and stilbene. So they come under pure organic scintillators. The second type is liquid organic solutions. So in this case, the pure organic scintillators are dissolved in a suitable solvent and then we obtain liquid organic solutions which work as scintillators. The third type of organic scintillators is plastic scintillators. Now the pure organic scintillators, after dissolving in the solvent, are subsequently polymerized. So after they are dissolved in a suitable solvent, they are polymerized and we obtain plastic scintillators. So there are other categories of organic scintillators. So you just have to remember these for your exam point of view. Now the another type of scintillator is inorganic scintillator. So the first type is organic scintillators, the second one is inorganic scintillators. So example of inorganic scintillator, the very common is sodium iodide. So this is called as thallium activated sodium iodide. Thallium activated sodium iodide. So we take an alkali halide, so this is alkali halide, and in this we add impurity which is thallium. So this works as a scintillator and this is called as thallium activated sodium iodide. Now the another type of inorganic scintillator used is cesium iodide, thallium activated cesium iodide. And then we also have sodium activated cesium iodide. Then we also have lithium iodide. So europium activated, this is called as europium activated lithium iodide. And there is another example of inorganic scintillator which is BGO, and this stands for bismuth germanate, and its formula is bismuth 4 germanium 3 oxygen 12. So these are the examples of inorganic scintillators and they are in crystalline state. So this thallium activated sodium iodide, thallium activated cesium iodide, so these are the alkali halides which are doped with some impurity and they are in their crystalline state. Now what is the purpose of this impurity? So in this case we have seen that we add thallium to the sodium iodide, then we add sodium to this cesium iodide. Now what is the purpose of this impurity? So if you will look at the pure crystalline form of sodium iodide, so we will get a valence band and conduction band. So in this pure form of sodium iodide, there is a valence band and conduction band, and electrons can go from the valence band to conduction band after absorbing the energy from the incoming radiation, and after that they will go to the ground state. So if you will take just this sodium iodide in pure crystalline form, then electrons will go to the excited state, they will go to the conduction band, and then they will go to the valence band and will emit a photon. Now this photon which is emitted could be easily absorbed by another electron in the valence band. So here comes the property that we have seen of an ideal scintillator, that the scintillator must be transparent to its own light which is emitted. So if you take pure form of sodium iodide, the electron after coming to the valence band emits photon, and that photon could be easily absorbed by another electron in the valence band. So here we cannot use the pure form of sodium iodide. So we add this thallium as impurity. Now what is the purpose of this thallium? This thallium introduces extra energy states in between conduction band and the valence band. So when you add this impurity, extra energy states are introduced in between conduction band and the valence band. So these energy states are that of thallium, and thallium is called as activator over here. So this is the impurity and this is called as activator, and scintillation is possible only because of this impurity which we have added to sodium iodide. So these are the energy states introduced by this impurity. Now these energy states are called as activator excited states, and this energy state is called as activator ground state. Now when this electron absorbs energy from the incoming radiation, it goes to the conduction band, and when it encounters an activator sites, this electron will go to the activator excited state, and this electron in the activator excited state will in return go to the activator ground state. Now in this process, the electron going from the excited state of the activator to the ground state of the activator, in this process light flashes are emitted, and these light flashes in return are made to enter the PMT, and we get an electrical signal. So this is the purpose of adding this impurity. Now let's look at the second main part of scintillation counter, the PM tube or the photomultiplier tube, or simply PMT. So the PM tubes are electronic tubes that produce a pulse of electric current when stimulated by a very weak light signal. So when a very weak light signal falls or enters this PMT, then a pulse of electric current is generated in the electronic circuit by this PMT. So this is the diagram of a PMT. So over here we have the entrance window, which is made up of glass. So this is the entrance window. So before this PMT, we have a scintillator which produces light flashes. So which produces photons in the visible region. So those photons enter the PMT through this entrance window, which is made up of glass, and the inside surface of this entrance window, inside surface of this glass is coated with a photoemissive substance, and this acts as cathode and is called as photocathode. Now when a light pulse enters the PMT, it strikes this photocathode, which is made up of a photoemissive substance, and a photoemissive substance is the one which ejects electrons when struck by photons of visible light. So when visible light photons fall on this substance, it emits photoelectrons. So when this photon falls on this substance, it emits a photoelectron in this PMT. So this is the photoelectron emitted. So this is the photoelectron. This photocathode is applied to a lower potential, and at the other end of the PMT we have an electrode which is connected to the higher potential of high voltage supply. So this electrode acts as anode, and this layer of photoemissive substance acts as cathode, and it is called as photocathode. Now in between anode and cathode we have diodes. So these are the diodes. So these are made up of metal, and they are coated with a material which has high secondary emission characteristics. So this diode is coated with a certain special material which has high secondary emission characteristics. So what is high secondary emission characteristic? It means that when one photoelectron strikes this material, strikes the diode, in return this diode emits large number of electrons. So when this electron falls on this diode, on the material which is coated on this diode, that material has high secondary emission characteristics, means in return it will emit large number of electrons. And here we have a focusing grid. This one is the focusing grid, and what is the purpose? It directs these photoelectrons towards the diode. So we want is that these photoelectrons must fall on these diodes, and in return large number of electrons are emitted. So we need a focusing grid so that these electrons direct towards the diode. So they fall on this diode. And the electrons which are emitted from this diode, large number of electrons, those electrons they fall on the second diode. Now the first diode is at a higher potential with respect to the photocathode. The photocathode is at a lower potential. Then this first diode is at a higher potential as compared to photocathode. Then this second diode is at a higher potential as compared to the first diode. Then this third diode is at a higher potential as compared to the second diode, and so on. So these diodes, they are kept at higher potential with respect to the previous diode. So when this photoelectron is focused by this focusing grid and it falls on the diode, in return large number of electrons are emitted from this diode. Now these electrons, they fall on the second diode. So this second diode is also coated with the material with high secondary emission characteristics, means this diode will also in return emit even more number of electrons. So let's say the multiplication factor, let's say just for example that the multiplication factor of each diode on an average is equal to 6. The multiplication factor is equal to 6 means when one electron falls on a diode, in return 6 electrons are emitted. So if from this diode 6 electrons are emitted, now these 6 electrons will fall on the second diode, and you can calculate that even larger number of electrons would be emitted from the second diode. And then you have a third diode. So from third diode even more number of electrons will be emitted. Hence you will get large number of electrons reaching the anode. So eventually large number of electrons will be reaching the anode, and hence you will get an output signal. So the inside surface of the glass entrance window is coated with a photoemissive substance. Now this substance emits electrons when struck by photons of visible light, and it acts as photocathode. The electrons which are ejected from this photocathode are called as photoelectrons. A short distance from the photocathode, we have a metal plate which is called as diode. And this diode is maintained, the first diode, this is maintained at positive voltage relative to the photocathode. So photocathode is connected to a lower potential, and this first diode is at a positive voltage, at a positive potential with respect to the photocathode, and attracts the photoelectrons ejected from the photocathode. So this diode attracts the photoelectrons which are emitted from this photocathode. Now this focusing grid directs the photoelectrons towards the diode. So this focusing grid directs the photoelectrons towards the diode. Now this diode is coated with high secondary emission. It is coated with a material with high secondary emission characteristics that we have already seen. The high-speed photoelectrons striking the diode surface, high-speed photoelectrons which are striking this diode surface, ejects several secondary electrons from it. So several secondary electrons will be emitted, and similarly from the second diode we will get large number of electrons. From the third diode we will get even more number of electrons emitted, and you will get large number of electrons eventually reaching the anode, and they will flow in the circuit, and you will get output electrical signal across the resistance R. So let's say if the multiplication factor of each dionode is equal to 6. So the average multiplication factor of each dionode is equal to 6, and let's say you have in total 10 diodes. So it's just an example that we have 10 diodes, let's suppose, and multiplication factor on an average of each dionode is equal to 6. So what will be the total multiplication factor? The total multiplication factor for this PMT will be equal to 6 power 10. So from the first diode, if you have 1 electron, you will have in return 6 electrons reaching the second diode. Then from the second diode, if 6 electrons are reaching, then from the second diode, you will have 6 power 2 electrons reaching the third diode. And similarly, if you have 10 diodes, then the total multiplication factor will be 6 power 10. Means if you have at the first stage, if you have 1 electron reaching the first diode, then from the 10th diode you will have 6 power 10 electrons which are reaching the anode. So you can clearly see that how the number of electrons have increased by a large amount. So this is the working of a PMT. Now from this PMT, electrical signal is taken into the counting device, in which it is amplified and then recorded. Now, in the case of scintillation counter, how the height of the pulse depends upon the energy deposited by the incoming particle. So in the case of GM counter, we have seen that the height of the pulse is independent of the energy deposited by the incoming particle. Whereas in the case of proportional counter, the energy deposited depends upon the height of the pulse depends upon the primary ionizations, or you can say the energy deposited. So more is the energy deposited, more will be the height of the pulse in the case of proportional counter. Whereas in the case of GM counter, the pulse height is independent of the energy deposited. Now what is the case in the case of scintillation counter? Now if more energy is deposited in the scintillator, in return you will get more number of light pulses. So if more number of light pulses reach the photocathode, more number of photoelectrons will be emitted. And if more number of photoelectrons are emitted, more number of electrons will be reaching the diode, and hence more number of electrons will reach the anode. So the height of the pulse signal in the case of scintillation counter is directly proportional to the energy deposited. More is the energy deposited, more will be the electrons reaching the anode, and hence more will be the pulse height. So what are the advantages of scintillation counter? First is that the pulse height is directly proportional to the energy deposited by the ionizing radiation. The second advantage is that its dead time is small. So the dead time of the scintillation counter is small. The third one is that its resolving power is high. Resolving power of the scintillation counter is high. So what do we mean by this? So the scintillation counter is capable of differentiating the two particles with a very little difference in their energies. So as you can see, the energy deposited, the pulse height is directly proportional to the energy deposited by the incoming radiation. So if you have two particles with a very little difference in their energies, this scintillation counter would easily detect the energy difference. So this is what we mean by resolving power. So resolving power of scintillation counter is high.